Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we have none other than UK's leading biohacker and the founder of the Health Optimization Summit. As a psychologist, specialist, serial entrepreneur, and successful businessman, this individual has founded and invested in multiple six-figure businesses, including several digital marketing agencies, and is the founder of London's first private hyperbaric oxygen clinic. Tim Gray, welcome to the show.
Hi, Wade. Thanks for having me, man.
It's so great to have you here. You know, we were hoping to be in person, at the legendary Biohacking Health Optimization Summit, which is the premier summit in the European Union, or I guess maybe not the European Union anymore with Brexit, but the bottom line is everybody knows about this event. We were scheduled to go see it, go be there this year and participate at Bioptimizers. I'm fascinated by events of, taking a step back under these COVID conditions that we're all dealing with. And, you're as an event creator, can you kind of share maybe what led up to, go to the Biohacking Summit? I know you have these meetups every week. You started with a meetup because I think the story of how you've created this is fascinating and how you've become one of the premier voices in this entire movement.
Thanks. I've been into health optimization and biohacking for 10 years before I knew what biohacking was. And I followed Dr. Makota's work religiously for a long time, reversed my mum's osteopenia from content I learned from his website that no one else seemed to talk about. And I've been in it for 5 years. And then one day I heard about bulletproof coffee and loved it. Found that my brain switched back online after being ill for so many years, and became a biohacker. And after listening to Dave's podcast, Bulletproof Radio, for a long, long time, I decided to go to the Bulletproof Conference in Pasadena, 2017. And when I came back to London, there was really no one except for a few people that were into health. So I decided to start the meetup group, Biohacker London meetup group. And that grew very, very quickly. It showed me that there was a lot of crazies out there like me. And then one day I told my mum about this group of biohackers, and she said, "What's a biohacker?" Which was, so I said, well, it's people that optimize their health and track things and whatnot. So after that, I started, when I was talking to anyone, I would kind of listen out for keywords because I'm a marketer by trade. And health and optimization kept on coming up. So I relabeled the Biohacker London meetup group to be Health Optimization and Biohacker London, and it basically tripled very, very quickly. And people kept on saying, well, this meetup's pretty good, why don't you do a summit? And by that time we were doing 200 to 300 people on a Sunday morning every month, just on a little meetup. So we're the biggest group of biohackers that meet on a regular basis globally in London. So thus the Health Optimization Summit came about. And I got to know the guys at PaleoFX and got to know Dave and his team at Bulletproof, and asked them to support me and partner to build something. And I built it out, and with their support and guidance, and we had a 1,200 person event in year one, and got all the big names from around the world to London, which was pretty epic. So it's really a skip through history.
That's such a beautiful story. And I think there's so many people who maybe in a country or in a location, and there's no biohackers, there's not people around, or they want to do an event, or they think they need to go somewhere else. But what I think is really great about your story is you went to the kind of the godfather of the industry, went to the event, saw what was going on, and said, hey, I want to see if I can connect with some like-minded people, and started a simple meetup. And that became the foundation. Now, did you draw team members or relationships and business arrangements from that group? Or how did that kind of morph from a meetup every month to a conference, which is, let's face facts, running a conference is extremely challenging. There's a lot of moving parts. You got people from calling all the world. You got booths. There's a tremendous amount of money on the line, a tremendous amount of organization. That's a pretty fast rise. How did you pull that all off?
Well, number one is if I knew then what I knew now, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I heard Keith from PaleoFX on a podcast 2 or 3 years ago, and he said you'd have to be bat crazy to do a conference because you have to hold on for dear life. And Dave's team over at Upgrade as well said the same, pretty much. And when you start unpacking it, it's not just getting speakers, exhibitors, and attendees in a room. There's just so many moving parts. It's scary. It's actually insane. But luckily, my background is building, scaling, selling companies. So I looked at it not like an events person. I looked at it like a machine, I guess. So everyone that works in the summit were pretty much early days meetup group people. Like, it draws, as you know, in the biohacking and health space, there's some really smart, driven, dopamine dominant people in it that don't take no for an answer and have to figure a way around everything. And, you know, that's pretty much everyone that works in the company. It's funny because the other day I saw a picture from the very first meetup from November 2017, and basically my closest team and some of my closest friends are all in that picture and have helped build the summit as well. So it's been awesome, with the odd exception, but yeah, no, it's brilliant. So yeah, so the summit came together with those guys, and now we're a team of about up to 15 people, depending on the time of the year and what we've got going on. And yeah, but I don't recommend it as the amount of moving parts is just scary, but it's fun as hell. It really is amazing.
You're doing such an amazing public service. And one of the things I find also interesting where we're kind of alignment is, and that is your use of, you know, kind of biological optimization or health optimization. And you move to that particular title. And in your opinion, do you feel there's a difference between biohacking and biooptimization? I have my own opinions about it, but I'd like to hear yours.
That's a good question. I think English are very reserved people, especially compared to the Americans. It's funny because when my brother works in the States, a lot, and he's always, the Americans are so open and they're very happy. It's a coffee-fueled nation, and then you come back to England and they're all stiff upper-lipped and, you know, miserable and vitamin D deficient. And I think it's a very different world in terms of marketing, and I think the English mentality is we feel sold to quite heavily. And it works very differently. Whereas in America, it's more of a commercial mindset and a lot more hype, and everything's times 10. And, you know, I mean, things like Tony Robbins events, for instance, were too much for English people originally, I think. But now the culture is spreading and it's becoming bigger. So when it comes to something like biohacking, it's a very funky forefront word that the media has actually pushed up against quite a lot and tried to make it look bad, you know, like the CRISPR or gene editing movements and transhumanism, and biohacking is really misunderstood as a result. And then English people are like, oh no, this is a bit too, you know, in our faces for the moment. So with the label of health optimization, that is the goal of biohacking. And, you know, we have an English expression for a product in the shops, which is it does what it says on the tin. You know, if it communicates on the tin clearly, you know what it is, you're going to have it if it's of value to you. So why that's really relevant is because when I stopped people on Oxford Street in London and said to them, do you want to biohack yourself? I had less than 0.1% of people that even knew what it was. And when we asked if you want to optimize your health, we had 95% of people say yes. 4% of people said yes themselves or a loved one, and 1% of people were the typical London 200 miles an hour in between on the lunch break or whatever, and rude and going for it. So it shows that by understanding the goal, people want it, whereas biohacking requires an extra level of communication. and can be misunderstood. So that's why I think it comes together. But for me, the goal is everything to one side, health comes first.
That's so astute. I've come to the same conclusions myself, even though of most people, I'm a transplanted Canadian here in America, and I love the American brashness in marketing. But one of the things for my own observation when we were looking at our company and what we're doing, I come from the bodybuilding world, and bodybuilding, I would say bodybuilders are probably the original biohackers. I mean, they were doing radical experiments on themselves. Number one, overcoming their natural genetic expression through lifting weights and getting things. Then there was the use of nutritional supplements. Then there was the use of variety of drugs and various training methods or activities for making, changes and repartitioning water inside the body, or which are mostly a cosmetic ideal. Mm-hmm. Some of that ended up spilling out into the performance area. And when Matt and I were forming the company, we realized there's actually 3 different areas that people address. There's the aesthetics. Most people are attracted into health because they want to look good for another partner. Then as life goes on, they're kind of dealing with maybe a performance model. Now, some athletes are into it just for pure performance. But certainly as one's career you get a little bit more mature, you're like, well, I'm not so concerned if I'm shredded and with a 6-pack, but I do need to be able to focus at a high mental level for my job and deal with my family and my business and all these other things. But ultimately at the end, the base of the triangle, we have this triangle, is health. I mean, right now it would appear that the unintended consequences of the technological innovation of the last 70 years has severely compromised human health in ways that we didn't anticipate. And I believe that health optimization is using concordant health technology to return and optimize our physiological conditions. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about some of the things maybe that you feel are really essential that you've discovered over the last decade on your own research and your own work, and from all the people that you bring to your conference and that come to your event and share their expertise and wisdom. What are some of the kind of things that you're saying, hey, these are the things that I need, that anybody that's into looking at optimizing their health should start here?
That's a really good question. I was asked very similar last week. It's like, if you could do something differently, what would you do differently in the last 10 years? I think I've tried so many different modalities and so many different things that a lot of them have been shiny toys. And it's always like, when you're super ill, you're just hoping it's the right thing to fix your health. It's the one thing that's going to put you over the edge. It's almost like the dream, like in Pulp Fiction in the movie, when they open the suitcase and all you see is this glow gold. It's like every time you open up a new supplement or something or other, or technology, it's like, yeah, I really hope it's this. And I think everything that comes back down to my health accelerates significantly when I'm utilizing nature. And a line I say frequently is, we're using, in biohacking, we use technology to mimic a natural environment in an unnatural world. And that is, if you're not able to get sunlight, natural sunlight, then you use satelliting or red light therapy. And if you're not getting much natural light and you're wearing clothes and you're not in a brighter country in the northern hemisphere or whatever, then you use vitamin D. And if you're not getting clean air, you use hyperbaric oxygen therapy or do Wim Hof, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So really everything is reversing like modern days, so to live like our ancestors would. And I think why it's relevant with you guys specifically is because we do have food that doesn't have as much nutrients in it. For instance, our livers are definitely stressed because they're having thousands of times the amount of toxins to deal with that they used to, so therefore they're not as efficient, which means obviously the bile and the digestion doesn't work as good as it should do. So it's again, things like Bioptimizers, digestive mastimes specifically are my very, very favorite, is because we're actually getting the enzymes to break down the things like our ancestors would have done, because they would have had that level in their food and their digestions would have been working better as well. So it's like, again, even digestive enzymes are using technology to mimic a natural environment in an unnatural world. So everything ties back into this. And I think for me, when I first saw a functional medicine doctor, she said, it's about your gut. Interestingly. And I went, yeah, no, I've got this going on and that going on, but really deficiencies and how your car operates when it's out of gas or hasn't got the right fuel or the right antifreeze in it makes a big difference. So I would definitely say I would have started with my digestion properly and understanding that, instead of doing all these crazy cleanses and not necessarily understanding that I could have been drinking Dettol from all the cleanses I was doing in poster supporting the natural processes. I'd also ensure that I was grounding properly, getting into nature. And again, that's quantified opposed to woo-woo, which is what a lot of people do think about grounding. And making sure that I'm getting enough sunlight or natural light is another one, and making sure that I'm hydrating properly. And again, I know you've got some hydration drops, which I use when I'm traveling actually, as well as various other things. So the basic building blocks for making the body operate correctly is digestion. So you get the stuff from your food. It's the sunlight and grounding so that your electrical system's working correctly. Your hydration, so your electrical system's working correctly as well. And those are really the fundamental things that everyone should do before they start biohacking. And then, if they can't get to nature, use the technology where you can. And I think that's the paleo movement has got the attachment to mainly food, it seems, but it's much bigger than that. It is about ancestral living and doing what the cavemen would have done. But when we come up against something that the cavemen wouldn't have had, i.e., hundreds of times the amount of toxins, we need to figure out ways to get rid of that. So that's how I feel that it comes together, and not many people seem to be talking about it like that, strangely. I hope that answers your question in a long-winded way.
Yeah, no, it really does, because this is a kind of an observational point that I've made, and I had the great fortune of growing up in a very rural community. I wasn't very happy about it at the time. I wanted to be in the city where all the technology and all my friends were and all that stuff, but I was literally living in the middle of nowhere in the woods where the telephone poles ended my road on a dirt road. But during that time, I spent a lot of time in nature. I worked manual labor outside every day, and my mom grew an organic garden. We made fun of her for it. But when I went to go to university and get into the city and study exercise physiology and these type of things, I found it ironic that I all of a sudden started to gain weight. I just didn't have the same energy and stamina that I had before. And I thought, what's going on here? And then I realized there was problems with the food I was eating at residence. And then, what I was subjected to, which, we still didn't have the internet like we do today. You had to go to the library and get books and things like that. So I'm dating myself, but that was my first interest or my first connection. And then later on, as I moved into the business world, where we have a company that's based in technology, I was like, wow, I'm now subjected to sitting at a computer screen. I sit at my desk most of the time while I'm doing my interactions. And I started to see that, wow, I really needed to look at how we have evolved as humans. And like, as I say, these unintended consequences of technological innovation. Food production, food distribution, storage, chemicalization, all the different things that have happened over the last 70, 80, 90 years. In your experience, beyond what you've said, what are some things that you feel are important for someone's, particularly when we'll talk about our UK audience that are living in the UK as opposed to, say, maybe Southern California?
That's a really good question as well. I think the vitamin D is a massive one, actually. And it may sound like it's a pretty obvious and eye-rolling one to most people, but I think British people are generally more closed off and not quite so happy. And when they go on holiday, they suddenly brighten up. And I think they're vitamin D deficient. And I think, especially around Corona times at the moment, some of the studies that have come out over the last few weeks are that I think it was 96% of people that are deficient in vitamin D have medium to high response to COVID. And funnily enough, 96% of people that have high vitamin D get mild or no symptoms at all. And in a northern hemisphere, especially if you've got darker skin, then you're going to be even more vitamin D deficient. So I think that's the first thing that should be optimized naturally through foods or sun, obviously, and secondary with a supplement. I actually did a post on it this week on Instagram because so many people have been asking me about what I do or what I recommend, for someone like my mum. Well, that's it. It starts with the vitamin D. And I know Dr. McCullough is also a huge advocate of vitamin D. He's been talking about it for a very long time. And obviously I'm a big advocate of him as well. So naturally I'll talk about that. But I think in colder countries, vitamin D is definitely a way to go. I just want to comment on that for a second, because I think this is a really astute point and something that's so ironic. We're living in this world right now where there's all this talk about race and division, particularly here in America. There's a lot of conflict and politicization of this. But at the fundamental, if we just look at biology, okay, the change, the color of a person's skin is a biological adaptation response to the amount of sunlight that you're getting. And so people who have lighter color skin is biologically their ancestors had migrated to northern climates and their skin began to lighten so that they could absorb more sunlight so that they could manufacture things like vitamin D. And people who were migrated to high solar environments got darker skin so they didn't get old, like they would be able to manufacture the optimal levels of vitamin D without burning their bodies and stuff. That's it. That's the only thing. And people are politicizing and they're creating these stories. But I find it fascinating that this is just a biological adaptation. And nobody in the medical industry is talking about the importance of this, the science, the biology of why we need sunlight and how it's essential to our immune system. Does that just strike you as the biggest irony you've seen? Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, absolutely and utterly. Let's throw more chemicals in for the body to deal with, opposed to making sure that the most basic building blocks are in place. That's the stupidity of it, in my opinion. But I mean, there's industry, there's industry, and unfortunately that does change things somewhat, but at the same time, yeah, it's bonkers. It's funny because there's studies on the vitamin D actually with darker skin in the northern hemisphere. Apparently guys African descent have the highest rate of prostate cancer when they're in northern hemisphere because of the lower rate of vitamin D, and also the same with colon cancer as well. So it's just really interesting how such a basic thing isn't optimized more, and the same obviously around osteoporosis, osteopenia, and all these things as well. So yeah, that's the basic. That's the one go-to. I think that I always would recommend first, especially around current times.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
What are some other things that you've discovered along your journey of doing so many different things? I find one of the things I want to talk about here particularly is hyperbaric oxygen. You founded a clinic. I used a lot of people don't know this, but I had a clinic in Vancouver, Canada, way back in the day. I think that was around 2007, 2008, 2009. And one of my hacks, when I made a comeback for the World Championships, I got ready for the the National Championships 3.5 weeks. And I was literally sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber that we had in a clinic. Can you talk to me about, and to our listeners, about what a hyperbaric chamber is, why it's so important, and why you founded a clinic in London in regards to this? Because I think this is a pretty phenomenal topic.
Yeah. It was a big one. It was a really big one for me, actually. I heard, funny enough, Dave Asprey talk about it on the Bulletproof Radio, and he just said about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and he said it's supposed to be an amazing thing, and he only mentioned it in like passing. So I googled it, looked at it, and thought, wow, this sounds amazing. This sounds too good to be true. There was only one clinic, and it was 2 hours outside of London, so it was 2 hours each way with an hour in between and a session in between, and blah blah blah. I went a few times, and I had chronic fatigue. I'd had immune issues for quite some time. I was pretty knackered. I was trying everything, even growth hormones to at that time for quite a while. And I had one session of hyperbaric, and the doctor said to me, you'll probably feel tired tonight. It's probably your body going to work. Anyway, so I had the session in this strange chamber, diving chamber. And my ears felt like they were going to pop or whatnot. And when I got on the train on the way home, I fell asleep on the train, which just would not ever happen. It wouldn't. I mean, it was just, my fight or flight is always so on. I'm always aware of everything around me. I never switch off. I observe everyone and everything around me. So it was a bit of an interesting thing. So I thought, I'm going to try this again. So I did it twice a week, 2 or 3 weeks, but it was such a time resource heavy that I just said to the doctor, look, I want a clinic near me in London. If I build it, will you run it?
That's beautiful.
And it was really that simple. And he said yes, because he was working in the middle of the country. He didn't have a particularly nice clinic, didn't have nice chambers or anything. There's this city boy that has obviously got companies and stuff and had the resources to do so. So I built the company over the space of 2 or 3 weekends, got the website up and running, got a clinic done, ordered the chambers, got it all up and running, got the hyperbaric doctor to run it for me. So it was really that simple, with a lot of compliance in between. The reason why it's so good, and I went through all of that, is probably more important to this, is what happens is we don't have clean oxygen in city air specifically. We're not breathing properly. We don't have the same posture. We're not using our lung capacity as we should do. We have a whole host of different things going on, and therefore we don't necessarily get the intercellular oxygen levels that we should do. Now, what hyperbaric oxygen therapy does is it administers 98% oxygen at a greater atmospheric pressure. So it's like squeezing more oxygen into the cells, more than you could do at normal atmospheric pressure. So if you had a bottle of water, for instance, a fizzy water, and you were to squeeze the air down, it would actually compress it. Well, in the body, that then gets into the cell. So it's very well documented around diabetic foot wounds specifically. This is an area of the medical world that does accept hyperbaric oxygen therapy. You see people that have got wounds that haven't healed up for years or for a very long time, and they potentially have it amputated. Having hyperbaric oxygen therapy over the space of 6 weeks gets them to heal up. Now, what that does is it's like when you have a cut on your hand. If you put a plaster over it, or a Band-Aid or whatever, it won't heal because it's not getting the air to it, and it's not healing as a result. If you rip the Band-Aid off, then it heals a lot quicker. And that's essentially what the hyperbaric chamber is doing from the inside out. Intercellular oxygen, which means that it spreads out through to all the body in areas it wouldn't necessarily get to in that level of concentration. So the body can do exactly what it was designed to do. That's essentially it. It's a diving chamber, so it's a tube about a meter round, 2 meters long, and you sit with a face mask on and just have oxygen and you chill out. And I got such a pro at doing it. I was having it every other day at one point. Obviously, because I had the clinic, I have Post-it notes all on the inside of the thing, working on my laptop while I was doing it and making every minute count. And my brain was on fire and absolutely amazing. So yeah, it's good for healing, energy, immune support. I had an operation that should have been 2 to 3 months of healing time where they needed to leave the wound open and let it heal from the inside out. It was a horrendous surgery. And I was doing it for an hour and a half a day. And in 3 weeks, the wound healed up. The surgeon said it was a miracle. I said it was hyperbaric oxygen therapy and red light therapy. He disagreed, but the history of hyperbaric oxygen therapy says otherwise. So yeah.
I always find it funny when medical doctors will oftentimes discount technologies just merely because they don't know about it, even though they'll say, well, we don't know what that is, but it can't possibly be that, which is a kind of interesting default position. Not to disparage medical doctors, but I find it just, I never could figure that out of why, well, you can't describe what's causing the response, but you're quick to discount something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have to turn away a lot of things, because if they accepted everything they were told, they would never have a baseline to work from. But sometimes it just takes a little bit of knowledge of looking at the data and seeing some evidence out there, for them to understand how good it is. And I mean, it is growing very quickly now, actually. There's a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Scott Scher, who I know through the hyperbaric conference I went to. He's very good friends with Dom D'Agostino. As you know, he's very big proponent of hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yeah, Dom's doing some testing on some blood sugar formulations for us. He's been a fantastic researcher. Just interviewed him last week again. He came back on the podcast. And what I love about Dom is he's, as high up the research ladder as you can do, dealing with the military, now, space agencies, highly secretive programs, and, are very accomplished from a doctorate perspective, but yet he's a hacker like everybody else. And he's running these experiments on us, he's trying to optimize everything in his life too. So he's, pricking his finger, doing blood tests. He's running continuous glucose monitors. He's doing training. So he's a very unique individual. Some of the, you've had so many great guests and so many, I would say powerful people who have really cracked the code on various areas that you bring to your conference every year. What are some other things that stand out to you that you went, these are things that I've chosen to integrate in my life on a long-term basis as far as health optimization?
Yeah. Another bloody good question, actually, said like a true British person. I like Dr. Sachin Panda's work around circadian rhythm. I think that's probably the most exciting and obvious, hidden in plain sight stuff out there. Obviously optimizing, like I talked about sleep optimization as my first fundamental for a very long time. But then it occurred to me after reading the Circadian Code, his book, and various other resources. Actually, I went to town on it once I realized how important it was. I then changed it from sleep optimization to optimizing your day, or the timing of everything for your life. And I think that's one thing that I will never change. It's understanding that we should wake with sunrise and we should sleep after sunset and block blue light so that we produce melatonin. It's so that we eat at the right time of day and actually let food ferment a little bit, like it would do in the cave. That men should fast a little bit longer because they would be out chasing an animal or collecting food or doing whatever they would be doing, while the wife would be in the cave feeding the children with a little bit of a store, so therefore they wouldn't fast quite so long, which is why their hormones go all over the place. And then knowing that you would exercise in a certain time frame so that you didn't increase your cortisol too much and it didn't mess up your sleep. And then, so I think understanding the timing of everything is relevant, especially with certain genes turning on and off at different times of day, especially around obviously food. And one thing that struck me, which is something I say so frequently, it's insane that so few people seem to know, is that the gene for insulin turns on and off different times a day, and we can produce up to 50 times less insulin after sunset. And as a result, if you eat far after sunset, your body is processing that food, your blood glucose stays high through the night and doesn't drop until 4 or 5 in the morning, which means you don't get your best, deepest REM sleep or deep sleep as a result of your blood glucose being so high. And one thing that I tied up with that, and I wanted to check it when I read it because it was so fundamentally huge for me, was my constant glucose monitor and my Oura ring. So I had both obviously tracking in real time. And
part of the cult, right? Yeah, you see someone with a ring. Are you one of us?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's just like, it's funny, if I ate at 9 p.m. my resting heart rate and heart rate variability wouldn't be better until 3 or 4 in the morning, which is like 3 or 4 hours after when it should be at its best, really. And then when I looked at my deep sleep and compared it to my blood glucose, where my blood glucose was a good low, but not too low, my deep sleep was best. So it's just like, hang on a minute, what this circadian, the timing for the day is so important for me specifically. And obviously Dr. Sachin Panda talks about that with the studies in the rats as well, about feeding them the same diet, but one was within a restricted window of 8 hours and one was all day, every day. The ones that ate within the same amount of food in the 8 hours actually lost weight because they weren't storing everything as fat through the night because of those genes. So I think that's along with grounding and sunlight, timing is the biggest thing. And if people nailed those 3 things, then, health would be significantly better for everyone.
Let's talk about a little bit about grounding and sunlight. I live here, I lived in Vancouver, Canada, which is very much like, I would say, London. It rains a lot during the winter time and very dark and cloudy. And one of the things that I absolutely had to do is I started using a high pressure, full spectrum sunbed a few times a week. And I noticed a significant improvement in my mood and my function when I did that, and a real drop off when I didn't. But there's another piece that you bring up here, which is grounding. And there's a lot of what I would call conjecture and mysticism and misunderstanding around grounding. And yet it's so profound. Like, so many people go on vacation and, they go, everybody no one imagines going to a vacation in, they don't put postcards of like frigid waters and, northern climates. They always, it's palm trees, a sunny beach, and the ocean. And I find it interesting that the ocean creates ions, and the beach, most people are walking around with their feet on the sand, and sunlight is shining at some exorbitant levels on the body. People, like, it's a recharging. And many northern climates, like if you go throughout Soviet Union and things like that, they would take holidays during the darkest parts of the year to the sunny parts to recharge the health of the population. And this is common practice in many, many cultures. Yeah. What have you learned that would, I would say, pass the critical British eye about grounding and how a person goes about it, should they find themselves in a city?
I generally talk about the things that are quantifiable openly anyway, and I test other things that aren't. It's just, obviously it's a very critical world often, and if you're talking about stuff that can be considered woo-woo, that can discredit you in many ways. So I had heard about grounding a few years ago and how good it was. I watched the documentary by Clint Ober a few years ago as well, and it seemed amazing, but I didn't really understand the importance of it into a whole body operating correctly. And it wasn't until I heard that you can actually measure your body voltage and the efficacy of grounding on your body, and that there had been live blood analysis showing blood before and after grounding, and also thermography as well. And I was just like, So in my usual style, like I did about digestion once upon a time, which is how I know about you guys, I literally tore apart every single podcast, every single resource, or everything I could on grounding. And and actually drew down diagrams so I could understand the whole process of it, so I could internalize it. And the basis of it is when we're connected to the earth, i.e. feet on the ground, grass, soil, sand, or in the sea or a body of water that's natural, where it's connected to the earth, we are getting free electrons from the earth. And those free electrons go and find those free radicals and pair and make it stable, which is obviously reduces inflammation and promotes healing, and is actually kind of like the yin to the yang for our bodies in terms of electric. So when we're getting sunlight, and that doesn't matter if it's direct sunlight or if it's just natural light through clouds, because without it, light is energy essentially, and it's positive photons or photon energy is what we're getting from the sun. Now, when we're connected to the ground, we're getting the positive photons and we're getting the free electrons, and that we're a biocircuit board in between the two. And that's actually something I heard Dr. McCullough mention it in very similar way to that, which really resonated with me, because calling us a biocircuit board, well, if we're not getting the sunlight and we've got rubber soles on and we're not connected to the earth, two fundamental parts for our energy isn't working properly. It's just not connecting, which is my hypothesis is when you're in a warmer country and you're getting more energy from the sun and you're grounding more, you don't get so hungry because you're getting your energy direct from source, opposed to from things that collected it from the sun, which is one step removed. Sure, you need your nutrients and your minerals and the food, you need your food, but you need a lot less when you're actually getting energy direct from source. So that's how sunlight and grounding pair together. But again, we're so far removed from the planet. I spent 10 weeks traveling until last month, and I pretty much was barefoot the whole time, pretty much. And then when I jumped on a train to head to Germany from Croatia, I looked around and I was just like, I'm on plastic flooring on a metal tube going along the railway lines. I've got no sunlight on me, and I felt like it's just such a downgrade. And yet I'm in a modern world on an amazing train going 80 mile an hour or whatever across Europe. And it's just like, I feel like I'm being hard done by here. I feel like I should be back, in nature. And it's interesting because my stats in terms of resting heart rate came down 18 to 20 beats a minute.
Wow. And
my heart rate variability was up 100 average. And then within 48 hours of being back in London, and bearing in mind my house is optimized for EMF, so I've had biological builder, and I've got various devices and whatnot, and the EMFs in my room are almost zero. My stats went back to where they were.
Isn't that incredible? What I love, I want to commend you that you've actually documented and recorded and was able to demonstrate that. So you're doing one of the things that I think is essential in optimizing one's biology. And that is correlating one's subjective experience and observation with external quantifiable data. Mm. And to me, that's where we begin to cultivate and understand what we are feeling, so that you get so good at it, you can almost tell where you're at the scale based on what circumstances that you're in. Unfortunately, most people don't have any baseline. So we have a policy of, you assess where you're at, you test something, and then you optimize that process. What are some other things that you have learned to kind of optimize your life to enhance your health, even though that you live in a city like London?
The tracking with the Aura ring, I know that obviously I feel like we're part of a big boys club wearing one. We are. But I think for the city, the hustle bustle, it never sleeps, as they say. Making sure that the sleep is optimized is super important, because we reverse the damage that we've done during the day to our body when we sleep. And if we don't sleep properly, we don't reverse the damage properly, and we age quicker. So I think that respecting sleep and making sure that it is your number one priority for your health is important. Obviously, within sleep, that comes into circadian rhythm, obviously, for what you're doing throughout the day to help that sleep become better. But I think most people in the city, they don't think they need to sleep much. They work super late. They get up super early. Like if you watch an episode of Suits, for instance, they seem to work until 10 o'clock every night and they're back in the office at 6 in the morning. I mean, this is city life. And if you're not gamifying it, would be giving you a sleep score every day, knowing that if you're in bed before, 5 minutes before where it says your optimal bedtime is, knowing that your score is going to be higher, you're gamifying life. You're gamifying your sleep, you're gamifying your health, and that's going to pay dividends. So I think in the city, making sure that you are optimizing your sleep, and that comes with things like blue blockers, making sure that you're, if you're out entertaining, for instance, for me, I used to entertain a lot of clients. If you are out and you do eat something that you wouldn't normally eat, having like gluten guardian, and not to throw a product out there, but I do, I love that. And it's like having the right things in place. So there's a whole host of things. And I think, again, another one is hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a good one. If you haven't got good air filtering system at home, which is very unusual to have in London, even though the air is very, very toxic and there's so many deaths from the bad air. It's reported in the press frequently. The other thing is also if you can't get on some grass, if you haven't got a garden in London, for instance, you can get a grounding bedsheet or a grounding pillowcase or a grounding mouse mat or a grounding floor mat that goes under your desk. So when you're standing at your desk or sitting at your desk, if you're not as optimized, then you're earthed out and you can, again, measure your body voltage. As you put your hand near a wall socket, you can see your body voltage go up when you're measuring it with a multimeter. And then as soon as you put your foot on an earthing mat, you'll see your body voltage come down to 0. And it's just like, when you can see it like that, it's just like, it's more than just a thought of this might be bad for me. You can actually quantify it. And it's like, and I remember when I got my first EMF meter, and I was going around the house checking it for all the different places around the house. And you can, it's going off the charts at certain points. When I then put the reader down, I would then hear that buzzing in my head whenever I walked past that point in the house, just thinking,
yeah,
this is toxic right here. I have quantified that this is bad. Like, get away from here. I actually moved house within 2 weeks as a result of it being so bad in some of the areas. But until you actually have the data to go, this is bad and this is how bad it is, you're not going to be as motivated to do it. So I think that, checking your EMFs is a good city one. Getting grounding sheets is a good city biohack. Making sure that you have the right, for instance, gluten guardian is a big one for me because I don't really eat bread, but when I do entertain, for instance, I might occasionally have it. And if they know you're a biohacker, they might be a bit judgy about it. But if you've got gluten guardian, then well, that's what biohacking, that's the definition of biohacking. It's using technology to reverse technological issues in modern times. So, that's the type of really the basic stuff.
It's kind of like I just thought of this word as like technology reversing technology.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly it. The gluten guardian is an absolute perfect example of that. My team, it's funny, we sat down to dinner and one of them had a chocolate gatto or something or other and it had gluten in it. And there's like, that's it. All I do is I push a few of these gluten guardians. It's just quite funny how they're so on brand and like on point with it as a result. It is using, that is the mindset of it, opposed to saying, I'm just going to avoid this completely altogether for the rest of my life and not get to enjoy something as a result of being too stubborn, opposed to going, actually, I'm going to take this with it and I'm going to be fine. And that's really biohacking. And because someone said to me a few months ago, well, why do you live in London then? Like, if you're a biohacker, I said, okay, what's the alternative? A wooden cabin on the side of a lake with no phone lines or electricity. Come on, like, be realistic. What can I do to hack my way out of this?
One of the things that we've started here is at Bioptimizers, I just moved into a place I call the Bio Home, and we're in the process of both enhancing the technology from an audio production and adding in all this biohacking stuff, but actually creating a biologically optimized home in the middle of the city in the middle of massive EMFs in the environment they have, because I do love technology. I love the best of both worlds. I love being able to fly in planes. I love being able to connect on a computer. I love being able to, eat things that maybe aren't the best for me because they taste good and it's nice socially, but I also like to have an optimal level of health performance and to look good at the same time. I want to, I know you've been very generous with the time. I want to talk a little bit. Can you speak about your conference? I know there's been a lot of changes that are happening and stuff, but I really would like for you to take the floor, talk about the Health Optimization Summit, what it's all about, the conference that you hold every year. What's the plans? How is it changing? And where can people connect with you as well to kind of stay on abreast to everything that you're doing and the kind of information that you're putting out there? Because you're putting out such amazing stuff and you have such a great event. And I know there's so many people that are just itching to go, when is it back? When are we going to get to go? I know I'm one of those people, so please tell us.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. So the Health Optimization Summit was, as you know, was born with those guys on board. And my thing is the absolute best speakers, bar none, like with the best research, not just the biggest names, but the ones that really are game changers with no exceptions. So the quality is assured. And I think that was the biggest draw. My belief was if you have the biggest speakers and the best brands, and everyone has been signed off and approved or used in my life or my team's lives, that will bring the attendees. And that's really what worked. So we have 40 speakers, 50 exhibitors, over 2 days with workshops and like movement classes, but really it's about the content and the brands and getting to meet all of these cool people. Like I remember when I first heard you on Dave's podcast, actually, a while back, and I was just like, I can't wait to meet these guys. And it was actually at the, I think it was the first time I met the team for Bioptimizers in Beverly Hilton, actually, last year. And then again at PaleoFX. And I was so excited because it's like you hear these brands, you get to see speakers such as yourself and I guess the faces of these brands. And it's so good to connect. And that's one of the things that I really love about these conferences. And as I said to you before we started recording, digital dating, for instance, will get you by for a certain while, but you're going to have to meet them at some point, especially if you want to make babies. and I think it's the same with conferences in terms of connecting with the brands, connecting with the tribe, really having the experience, because we didn't evolve with digital screens blocking us from everything. So it's really an immersive experience of bringing everyone together. And the Health Optimization Summit is different because I brought biohacking, health, fitness, medical, wellness, nutrition, biohacking, paleo, keto, everything with the viewpoint of optimizing health. And so that's all the cool futuristic stuff, and it's all the natural things brought together, but quantified natural, saying it's not just, something that can't be proven that people roll their eyes at and call it woo-woo. It's really the best of the best brought together and the best speakers for it. And you get to meet your favorite authors. Last year we had obviously John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women From Venus, and as Dave Asprey calls him, one of the original biohackers, because he's been into this whole hormone optimization for a very, very long time. And so, he had a lot of fans that came along that really wanted to meet him and get to see all of these guys. So it's just awesome to have it in London, because it's obviously Europe. We don't often get all the luxuries that you American guys, the American guys get. All these events all the times, and we're very new to it in England, so it's a big experience. And when we got 1,200 people in year one, we knew it was pretty cool. So that's happening at the moment, 30th and 31st of January in central London, but with our Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying that there might be issues for up to 6 months. We're just putting a contingency plan in place for later on in the year, just to make sure that we can have a big proper event where we can actually all meet without any restrictions. So we're just working on that at the moment.
Well, one of the things that you do, and I think is really important, is that you provide a lot of information to your community ongoing. So can you share where people can reach out to you, connect with you, and tap into the information that you provide? Because I think one of the great values is you're very curative in how you screen people that present information, so you know you're getting really premier stuff. It's not filler. So if you could kind of give everybody all your connections and social links and where they can get a hold of you and how do they find out about the conference, and if they, you know, to get tickets so that they can go and get on that list, because it is a very, you know, there's only so many people these events can hold, and so it's something that people want to attend.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, first of all, the website is healthoptimization.com. That's with an S, not a Z, because we're British and we're awkward like that. So it's the healthoptimization.com, sorry. I'm on Instagram at Tim Biohacker, and also Health Optimization Summit is the summit's social media. In terms of the speakers, we really are very specific about who we invite, and it's by invite only. We have 300 applications each year, and I don't really take any of the applications. It's only by invite, as you know for yourself, actually. So, you know, someone I really wanted you to speak. And so I curate the whole experience from a high level of what are all the areas of health that we should be covering, and visualize it so that I know that we've got all of the topics covered, so that even beginners can come in and get a really good rounded view on health with the best content. And then it's the same with the exhibitors as well. I make sure that there's not overlap in the brands. It makes sure that every one of the products I've tested or I already use in my life or my team do, and there's no exceptions to that at all. Like literally every single product has been used, tested, and torn apart by me. And I talk about that on my Instagram very openly. I'm very open about everything I use and how I share it. So if you want to check out on Instagram any of these brands or these speakers, then, you know, that's the best place to do it.
Tim Gray, you're a wealth of information. You're doing great work in the world, and more importantly, you're building a community that allows people to connect in the real world about this incredible health optimization technology. I encourage all our listeners to follow Tim. He's got so much great information, and especially our folks in Europe, because it's a great event that he holds. It's a great place to connect, and like you said, meet, greet, and perhaps even flesh out some of the ideas that you have, or share some technology that you might have crafted, created, or learned about with other people and enthusiasts to find out, hey, here's your tribe. So Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. And for all our listeners at Bioptimizers, I want to thank you for joining us for another health episode at the Awesome Health Podcast from Bioptimizers. Of course, check out Tim's stuff, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar, live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, you know, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.